The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I could bring myself to open it. Thick, official, the kind that changes everything. When I finally tore it open, my hands shook. My parents were suing me. Not strangers, not some corporation, my own mother and father, Diane and Robert Harrison, demanding $350,000 for the cost of raising me. The paperwork was cold, clinical, listing every meal, every piece of clothing, every year under their roof like items on a receipt. And at the bottom, in language that didn't bother hiding the truth, they spelled out exactly what they wanted. Money to finish paying off the mortgage on the house they'd bought for my sister Sarah, the house she couldn't afford, the house they'd assumed I'd cover without question because that's what I'd always done: show up, stay quiet, and pay. I'm Emma Harrison. I turned 32 last spring, and for most of my life I've understood exactly where I stand in my family, somewhere in Sarah's shadow. My older sister by 3 years was everything our parents wanted: graceful, married young, 2 beautiful boys by the time she was 27, a woman who baked from scratch and sent holiday cards before Halloween. She did life right, at least according to Diane and Robert. I took a different path, stayed single, poured myself into my career, rented a small apartment across town where nobody asked when I'd settle down. I had a retirement account, savings I'd built carefully over a decade, and zero intention of depending on anyone. Apparently none of that mattered when you weren't wearing a wedding ring. My parents never said it directly, but their questions always carried weight. "Don't you want children before it's too late? Sarah's boys are growing so fast. Such a shame they don't have cousins. You're still renting that place?" I learned to smile, nod, redirect the conversation. There was a time I thought if I worked hard enough, saved smart enough, maybe they'd finally see me the way they saw Sarah. But the truth settled in slowly, like dust you stop noticing on the furniture. I wasn't the daughter they celebrated. I was the one they assumed would always be fine no matter what happened. Still, I never made waves. I showed up for holidays, fixed their router when it failed, brought wine to dinners even when they forgot my birthday, which happened more than once. For the most part, I kept my distance. It felt safer. I didn't realize back then that distance wouldn't protect me, that eventually they'd reach across it and try to pull me in so tightly I'd barely recognize myself anymore. Sarah's perfect life started crumbling quietly at first. Then all at once, the way glass shatters. Her husband Kyle had been cheating for years. She found the messages one night, or maybe she'd always known and finally stopped pretending. When she filed for divorce, nobody blamed her, not even our parents. Kyle disappeared right after the papers were signed. No child support, no apology, just gone. Sarah was left with Tyler and Lucas, 2 boys under 10, and bills stacking up faster than her part-time job at the community center could handle. Our parents were sympathetic, but their savings were locked in retirement funds and sentiment. Sarah moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment where the boys shared a room and the wallpaper peeled in the corners. I didn't hesitate. I paid her attorney's retainer, covered 6 months of rent when her hours weren't enough, even watched Tyler and Lucas some weekends so she could breathe. I never mentioned it, never expected thanks. I loved my nephews, and Sarah, for all her past perfection, looked shattered in a way I'd never seen before, like someone who wasn't used to asking for help and hated needing it. I thought maybe now our parents would finally understand. Maybe this time they'd see I wasn't the one with something to prove. They didn't. Instead, every call with my mother started with updates on Sarah's struggles, followed immediately by questions about whether I was dating anyone yet. I stayed quiet, helped where I could, told myself this was what family meant, showing up even when you felt invisible. But here's the thing about always being the reliable one. Eventually, people stop seeing your help as a gift and start treating it like an obligation. It was a Wednesday evening when my mother called. "Catherine, honey, we have such wonderful news. Can you come by tonight?" Her voice had a brightness I hadn't heard in months, maybe years. For a second, I thought Kyle had resurfaced, that the courts had tracked him down, or that Sarah's life had finally turned a corner. "Is this about the boys or child support?" I asked. No, even better," she said. "Just come over. Your father's already home and Sarah will be here too." I drove across town after work, tired but curious. Something felt off about her tone, too rehearsed, too smooth, but I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe for once it really was good news. When I walked into their living room, everyone was already seated. Dad in the recliner, Mom perched on the edge of the couch, Sarah beside her wearing a nervous smile. On the coffee table sat a manila folder. "There she is," Dad said, standing to hug me before handing me the folder. "Take a look at this." Inside was a stack of documents thick with legal language and real estate logos. At the top, mortgage agreement. "What is this?" I asked. "It's for Sarah's new house," Mom said, beaming. "We used most of our savings and some of the retirement fund for the down payment. Isn't it wonderful?" I blinked. "You bought a house?" "Yes," she said. "A beautiful place, 3 bedrooms, big yard for the boys. They need stability, and that apartment just isn't working anymore." I looked at Sarah, who nodded slightly but said nothing. "That's great," I said honestly. "The boys will love that." I started to hand the folder back. No, those are for you," Mom said, pushing it toward me again. "What do you mean for me?" Dad cleared his throat. "We've discussed this as a family, and we've decided you'll take over the mortgage payments. You've been saving for years. You can handle it easily." "Sarah can't afford it," Mom added gently. "She's doing everything she can, but the boys need this." The room went silent. Every eye was on me. "You're asking me to pay for Sarah's house?" I asked slowly. Sarah still wouldn't meet my gaze. "After Kyle left, I have nothing," she murmured. "I can't give them what they need without help." I looked at the mortgage amount again. It was staggering. "I already paid for her divorce," I said quietly, "and half a year of rent. I've been saving for 10 years to buy my own home." "Sweetheart," Mom said, reaching for my hand. "We raised you. We've done so much for you. Isn't it time to give back?" I stood up, heart pounding. "You bought a house knowing she couldn't afford it because you assumed I'd just cover it." Dad didn't deny it. "You don't have a husband or children," he said flatly. "What else are you saving for?" "I'm not doing this," I said. "This isn't help. This is manipulation." I left the folder on the table and walked out before I could start screaming. I thought they'd cool down. I told myself they'd realize how ridiculous it all was, that asking your unmarried daughter to fund her sister's house wasn't something reasonable people defended. I was wrong. The first call came that Saturday from my cousin Brittany, someone I hadn't seen since Grandpa's funeral. "Melissa told me what happened," she said. "No hello, no pause. I can't believe you're being so selfish." "Excuse me," I asked. "Sarah's a single mom, Emma. Those boys are your nephews, and you're just sitting on all that money refusing to help." I gripped the counter. "Brittany, you don't know the full story. I know enough. Family helps family." Before I could respond, she added, "Sarah would do the same for you." I almost laughed, bitter and involuntary. "No, she wouldn't," I said quietly. "You're unbelievable," she snapped and hung up. The texts started after that, then voicemails. People I barely knew suddenly had opinions. Uncle Greg, Melissa, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, all piling on. The messages blurred together. "You're selfish. They raised you. She has children, and you don't. What kind of person are you?" What struck me most wasn't the anger, it was the certainty, as if they knew beyond any doubt that I was wrong. That because I hadn't built a family of my own, I was now fair game to fund someone else's. The worst came from Aunt Sharon, my mother's older sister. She called during dinner. "I just want to talk some sense into you," she said in that syrupy tone she'd perfected. "You're not getting any younger, Emma. Who knows if you'll ever have children? At least this way you'd be contributing to your family's future." "So, because I'm single," I said slowly, "I owe Sarah a house?" "Don't be dramatic. They need help, and you're in a position to give it." That night, I blocked every number that had chimed in, one by one. If they couldn't respect my boundaries, they didn't deserve access to my peace. And deep down, I knew something I hadn't wanted to admit. This was never about the house. It was about my place in the family, and they'd already decided what that was. 2 months passed in silence. I didn't hear from my parents, Sarah, or anyone I hadn't already blocked. I focused on work, took morning walks, let the quiet become something close to peace. Then the envelope arrived on a Thursday, thick and official-looking. I thought it was insurance paperwork at first, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. They were suing me. Diane and Robert Harrison, my own parents, had filed a formal civil claim demanding $350,000 in reimbursement for expenses related to Emma Harrison's upbringing. I read it twice, 3 times, each line colder than the last. They'd itemized food, clothing, education, even included a section titled Emotional Support During Adolescence, which I couldn't read without a bitter laugh. They tried to count family vacations from when I was 6 years old, and at the end, in plain language, funds to be used to complete mortgage payments on the Harrison property purchased for Sarah Harrison and her minor children. They weren't even subtle. They didn't pretend this was about principle. I called the best lawyer I could find. Andrea Mitchell met with me the next day, sharp-eyed behind glasses, speaking like she'd seen worse and hadn't blinked once. "They have no legal right to your money," she said flatly, flipping through the packet. "Parents are obligated to provide for their minor children. There's no legal expectation of repayment." "So why sue me?" I asked. Andrea shrugged. "Pressure tactic. They think you'll cave to avoid court, or they genuinely believe you owe them." I felt numb, then angry, then ashamed for feeling either. Over the next 3 weeks, I gathered everything. Proof of the $7,200 I'd paid for Sarah's rent, the $5,500 check to her divorce attorney, bank transfers to my parents over the years, $500 here, $1,000 there, texts from my mother asking for just a little help when Dad's pension fell short. I found receipts I didn't remember keeping, pulled records from old email accounts. Every line was a memory I hadn't asked to revisit. When the court date came, I wore gray slacks and a blouse my grandmother had given me years ago. I brought only what I needed, and Frank and Dorothy, my grandparents, who showed up in quiet defiance of their own daughter. Grandma squeezed my hand before we walked in. "What they're doing isn't right," she whispered, "but you already know that." Across the aisle sat my parents with Sarah between them, aunts and uncles behind them, people who hadn't sent me a birthday card in years now here to support the family. On my side sat just 2, Grandpa Frank and Grandma Dorothy. She wore a brooch I hadn't seen since childhood. When she leaned over to squeeze my hand again, I almost broke. The judge walked in, gray at the temples, glasses low on his nose, the kind of man who didn't rush to speak because he'd already heard every kind of lie. My father stood first. "Your Honor," he began, "we're not unreasonable people, but we invested our lives, our money, our time into raising Emma. We're only asking for a portion of that back to help our other daughter and her children." The judge didn't blink. "Specifically," he said, flipping a page, "what did you spend on her education after she turned 18? Mom and Dad exchanged glances. Dad cleared his throat. "Well, at that time, Sarah had just gotten married. We were helping her and her husband get established." So the judge clarified, "You did not contribute to the defendant's college expenses?" "No," Mom said quickly, "but my mother, Emma's grandmother, did, and since she's my mother, I'd argue we supported her indirectly." From behind me, Grandma let out the faintest scoff. Andrea rose, calm and methodical. "Your Honor, we have documentation showing Miss Harrison has been financially independent since age 18. In addition, she has provided repeated financial support to both her parents and her sister." She handed over the file, bank transfers, receipts, emails. This includes $7,200 in rent payments for her sister, $5,500 to her divorce attorney, and multiple direct deposits to her parents during times they reported financial hardship. The judge reviewed quietly, then looked up. "So, the defendant wasn't receiving support, but giving it, correct?" "Correct," Andrea said. My mother shifted in her seat. "That money isn't relevant," she argued. "We're talking about the cost of raising her. Food, shelter, emotional guidance." "Why exactly?" the judge asked. "Do you need $350,000 now?" Mom hesitated, looked at Sarah. "To help Sarah pay off the mortgage," she said softly. Silence. Even Uncle Greg shifted uncomfortably. The judge turned to Sarah. "Miss Harrison, do you believe your sister should be responsible for your home loan?" Sarah finally looked up. "She's not married. She doesn't have children. I do." "And that creates a financial obligation?" he asked. "We're family," she said. The judge raised an eyebrow. "I'm not married either. Should I pay for my clerk's rent or my bailiff's children?" Rachel blinked, said nothing. For the next hour, he asked hard questions, not cruel, but unflinching. Why did they assume I would pay? Why purchase a house they knew Sarah couldn't afford? Why tie help to guilt and guilt to debt? They gave answers that collapsed under their own weight. When we stepped outside, Grandma hugged me first. "You were steady," she said. "That's more than I can say for anyone else in that room." I wasn't sure if I'd won, not yet, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one on trial. The verdict came 1 week later. The courtroom felt smaller the second time, maybe, because I was finally breathing in it. The judge didn't waste words. After reviewing the evidence, I find the plaintiff's claim to be without merit. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, the financial responsibility of raising a child does not entitle you to reimbursement once that child becomes an adult. He glanced down at his notes, then back up. In fact, the evidence suggests Miss Emma Harrison has already provided significant financial support to both you and her sister. Then quietly, but not softly, "Frankly, I find your behavior toward your daughter to be brazen and disappointing." Dismissed. Just like that. I didn't celebrate, didn't cry, just stood there while Andrea smiled and Grandma squeezed my arm and Grandpa whispered, "You're free." I thought it was over. It wasn't. A week later, Grandma called. "Your mother came by yesterday," she said, voice tired. "She asked us to release her inheritance early." "For what?" I asked, though I already knew. "To pay off Sarah's mortgage," she said. I sat down. "What did you say?" I told her we haven't decided who gets what, that the will is ours to manage. "Did she get angry?" "No," Grandma said. "She cried, begged us not to disinherit her." I didn't know what hurt more, that she asked or that she cried over money instead of me. Months passed, quiet ones. I closed on a small house, nothing grand but mine. I painted the kitchen pale yellow, planted tomatoes out back, adopted a gray cat that slept beside my laptop every night. Sarah rented out the house, moved back in with our parents. Mom babysat while Sarah worked. Somehow they made it work. I didn't call, didn't write. Then, almost a year after the trial, an email landed in my inbox. No subject line, just this. "We heard you bought a house. Since you now have extra space, we think it would be best if Sarah and the boys moved in with you. It would be much more convenient for them there. Let us know when they can move in. Love, Mom and Dad." I read it twice. I didn't get angry. I just replied, "I will not be hosting Sarah or the boys. If you contact me again with these kinds of demands, I will report the harassment to the police. Do not email me again." Then I hit send, blocked the email, and made tea. These days, my house smells like fresh coffee and basil. The cat, marble gray and solemn, sits on the windowsill most mornings watching birds he'll never chase. It's quiet here. No raised voices. No questions I don't want to answer. Frank and Dorothy visit often. They bring pie or old newspaper clippings they think I'll like. Grandpa helps with the gutters. Grandma still reminds me to lock my windows at night even though I've got a security system. They don't talk about my parents unless I ask, and I rarely do. I'm dating someone now, Daniel. Kind, with a laugh that feels like space being made. He doesn't ask about my family. Not yet, and I don't offer. Some ties don't need explaining. Some ties don't need mending. Every once in a while, I feel that ache of what could have been, if they'd ever seen me as more than spare parts, if love hadn't come with fine print. But I don't regret saying no, not anymore, because peace I've learned isn't given, it's claimed. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories like this one.
The room was warm with laughter, glittering with tinsel, and packed wall to wall with family. Kids ran across the living room in fuzzy socks, tearing through wrapping paper, while adults held up phones to capture every moment. Every child had a gift in their lap, except mine. Ellie stood by the tree, 6 years old, in her red velvet dress with a little candy cane headband she'd picked out herself. She looked at me, confused, then hopeful. Then the smile faded. My mother clapped her hands and said, "That's everyone." I paused. "Mom, you forgot Ellie's." She blinked. "Oh," she said, glancing at the pile. Then laughed.
Oops.
We forgot her. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it cut sharper than any scream. A few of the adults chuckled awkwardly, not sure whether to join in or shrink back. My sister smirked. My brother looked away. Ellie's bottom lip began to tremble. She clutched the edge of her dress and whispered, "Did Santa forget me too?" That did it. Something in me settled.
Hardened.
I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I simply knelt beside her, brushed her curls back, and said gently, "No, baby. Santa didn't forget. He just sent your gift through me instead." I reached into my purse, pulled out a small box wrapped in silver paper and tied with a satin ribbon. Ellie's eyes lit up. Everyone in the room turned. Some of them squinted, curious. Others leaned in like they were watching something they couldn't rewind. Ellie untied the ribbon slowly, peeled back the paper. Inside was a black velvet box. She opened it
And gasped.
A delicate gold necklace with a heart-shaped locket sparkled inside. She looked up at me. "Can I open it?" I nodded. She pressed the clasp and the locket popped open. On one side, a photo of us, just me and Ellie, nose to nose, laughing under the park gazebo from last spring. On the other, a tiny inscription in soft cursive. "You are loved beyond measure, Mommy." The room fell absolutely silent. No one laughed. No one moved. I kissed her cheek and said clearly, louder than I needed to, just loud enough to echo, "Real love never forgets." Ellie smiled through her tears and whispered, "I love it, Mommy. It's my favorite." And in that moment, while they all sat frozen with nothing to say, I smiled too. My name is Vanessa Carter. And from wherever you're watching this video, stay with me. Because when they tried to humiliate my daughter at Christmas, I didn't clap back. I let the silence speak for us. I was never the favorite. Not the loud one. Not the funny one. Not the golden child. That was always my sister, Marla. And when she didn't shine, my brother David did.
Me?
I was the one who cleaned up after the party. The one who offered to help with dishes. The one they said was too sensitive whenever I brought up how often I was left out. Growing up, my mom always made excuses. Marla got the newest clothes. I got her hand-me-downs. She had a sweet 16 with a DJ and a cake taller than me. Mine was a potluck in the backyard, and I made my own cake. When I got pregnant with Ellie at 21, the silence was louder than any scream. No celebration. No congratulations. No baby shower. My mom said, "Well, you made your bed." I remember sitting in the hospital alone, holding Ellie for the first time, wondering if being a mother would feel less lonely than being a daughter. It did. And it didn't. I raised Ellie without their help. No babysitting offers. No, "Can I bring you groceries?" Not even a birthday card in her first year. The only time they started paying attention again was when Ellie turned 5, and I brought her to Thanksgiving. Everyone said the same thing. "Wow, she looks just like you did." And I remember thinking, so maybe now she'll be invisible too. Still, I kept going to the family events.
Why?
Because I thought showing up meant maybe they'd come around. Maybe they'd see me. Maybe they'd see her. But every party, every get-together, it was the same thing. Ellie was so cute, but somehow always left out of the group games. She was sweet, but never on the cousin's sleepover invite list. And last Christmas, they handed out gifts to all the grandkids. Except her. They said the delivery was delayed. They said it was a shipping error. But this year, there was no delay. No excuse. Just laughter when my daughter stood alone under the tree. Oh, we forgot her. And that was when the pattern finally snapped into place. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was intentional. Calculated. She was my daughter. And just like they treated me, they had decided she was disposable too. But I wasn't that same silent daughter anymore. And she wouldn't be raised in my shadow. So I smiled and pulled out the gift I had bought weeks ago. A gift I saved for exactly this moment. Because if they were going to show her how small she was to them, then I was going to show her how big she was to me. Looking back, the signs were there. They didn't forget Ellie. They never wanted her included to begin with. 3 weeks before the party, the family group chat was full of planning. Potluck assignments, pajama sizes, gift themes. But no one asked for Ellie's size. No one even tagged me in the message. When I messaged privately, "Hey, just checking, should Ellie and I bring anything?" My mom replied with a thumbs up emoji. No words, just that cold little icon. I offered to help with desserts. She said it was covered. I suggested we do something special for the kids this year, maybe a photo booth or crafts. She said, "Don't complicate it, Vanessa. It's already enough." Then, the week of the party, I saw my sister's Instagram post. 9 Christmas gift bags lined up with tags for the grandbabies.
9.
There were 10 grandkids in the family. Ellie made 10. I stared at the photo.
Zoomed in.
No tag with her name. I showed it to a friend. She said, "Maybe it's a mistake?" But mistakes don't happen this often. Not to the same people. Not to the same child. On the day of the party, Ellie and I arrived to find everyone else in matching green plaid pajamas, something they apparently organized weeks ago. The kids posed for a group photo. Ellie stood off to the side, unsure whether to jump in. I nudged her gently, but my mom said, "Let's just do one with the matching ones first, okay?" I felt Ellie's little hand tighten around mine. She didn't say anything. She never does. She's quiet, like I used to be. Watches everything. Says little. But I know when she's hurt. And that photo, that exclusion, cut her deeper than she could explain. Still, she smiled when they offered her a gingerbread cookie. Still said, "Thank you," when her aunt handed her a paper crown. She tried. She always tries. But I could see it in her eyes. That slow realization. That awareness that somehow, even in a room full of people who share her blood,
She was outside of something.
and I knew, standing there with that same ache in my chest I had carried for years, I couldn't let her grow up thinking this was normal. Thinking love had tears. Thinking she had to earn basic kindness. That's when I reached into my purse. Felt the smooth shape of the small wrapped box. The one I had brought just in case. Not because I was expecting the worst, but because I remembered the worst. And I refused to let history repeat itself with my daughter. So when the last gift was handed out, and everyone clapped and laughed and hugged their children, and Ellie looked around, blinking back tears, and my mom said through laughter, "Oops, we forgot her." I smiled, not out of anger, but clarity, because I hadn't come for their gifts. I had come prepared to give my daughter something better. Proof that someone thought of her, planned for her, loved her first. The moment I saw last year's party unravel, Ellie clapping politely while the other kids opened gifts with wide eyes and glittering bows, I made myself a promise. Never again. Not another Christmas of sitting quietly. Not another moment of pretending forgotten and uninvited were just accidents. Not when the child they were doing it to was mine. So I started planning early. I saved money quietly over months. Skipped takeout, packed lunches, sold a few old dresses online. And one morning in October, I walked into a tiny jeweler shop tucked between a bookstore and a coffee shop. The kind of place with velvet trays and quiet lighting. I asked the woman behind the counter, "Do you have lockets?" She showed me a few, but one stopped me cold. A delicate gold heart with the tiniest clasp and just enough space inside for a memory. I picked it up and whispered, "This one." 2 days later, I returned with a photo, Ellie and I at the park that spring. Her on my shoulders, our faces tilted toward the sky, caught mid-laughter. The jeweler smiled when she saw it. "You want this inside?" "Yes," I said. "And something engraved." She nodded. "What do you want it to say?" I paused, thought of every birthday no one showed up for, every group photo she was left out of. Then said, "You are loved beyond measure, Mommy." It took a week to make. When I picked it up, I didn't cry, but I held it in my hand like it was made of glass. Not because of the money, but because of what it meant. I wrapped it in silver paper, tied it with satin ribbon, and tucked it gently into the inside pocket of my purse, right next to my phone and house keys. Not because I knew they'd forget her again, but because I couldn't risk them doing it twice. I told myself maybe they'd changed. Maybe this time would be different. But in my heart, I knew. People who forget you when it's easy don't remember you when it counts. So when Ellie stood by that Christmas tree, lip trembling, empty-handed while the other kids tore open presents and her name was never called, I didn't panic. I didn't flinch. I reached into my purse, felt the soft edges of the box I'd wrapped just for her, and remembered the girl I used to be, who waited her whole life for someone to show up and never did. Then I knelt beside my daughter, and I showed up. Ellie's tiny hands twisted the hem of her dress as she looked around the room. Her cousins squealed over tablets and dolls. Wrapping paper flew through the air like snowflakes, and she just stood there,
Still.
forgotten. I could feel it building in her chest. The heartbreak. The kind of silent shame a child can't name yet, but knows how to carry. The kind I carried for most of my life. My mother laughed like it was a sitcom.
Oh.
We forgot her. She actually clapped, like it was just another silly accident. Ellie turned to me, eyes welling. Mommy, did I do something wrong? That was it. I reached into my purse, knelt to her eye level, and said softly, No, baby. You did everything right. I pulled out the small silver-wrapped box. She blinked, surprised. For me? I nodded. From someone who never forgets you. The room started to quiet. One by one, the aunts, uncles, and cousins turned.
Phones stopped clicking.
No more paper tearing. Just silence. Ellie carefully peeled the ribbon, lifted the lid. Inside, the velvet box caught the light. She opened it
And gasped.
The gold locket gleamed. Her little fingers ran over the delicate heart, then paused. Can I open it? Go ahead, I whispered. She clicked it open. And there we were, frozen in laughter. Our joy captured in that photo beneath the gazebo. On the other side, she read the inscription aloud, lips forming each word slowly. You are loved beyond measure, Mommy. She looked up at me, eyes glassy. You made this for me? I nodded. Because you'll never have to wonder if you matter. Her smile was soft and stunned and small, but it reached the deepest part of me. Then she turned slowly to the room, clutched the necklace to her chest, and said, to no one in particular, This is my favorite gift. No one spoke. My sister looked down at her wine glass. My brother cleared his throat. Even my mother, so loud just moments ago, just stood there, jaw slightly open. She knew. They all knew. And I didn't have to say anything else. Not one word. Because sometimes silence says, You saw what you did. You knew what you were doing. And I won't beg you to explain it. I stood, lifted Ellie into my arms, and walked to the couch. She asked if I could put the necklace on her. I fastened the chain and kissed her cheek. She leaned into me, warm and safe. And as I looked across the room, at a family that once made me feel small, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt like a mother, a protector, a woman who had finally stopped waiting for love to come from people who forgot her too easily. By the time dessert was served, the air had shifted. You could taste the awkwardness in the peppermint bark. No one said anything directly, of course, but no one looked me in the eye either. The cousins who were once bouncing off the walls sat still, casting glances at Ellie's locket like it was a crown. My sister scrolled on her phone nonstop. My mom? She poured herself another glass of wine and started fussing with the candles like they were the problem. After the party, I got the first text before I even made it home. Aunt Monica. Just wanted to say, I saw what happened. That was wrong. Ellie is a sweetheart. The next day, my cousin Ray, if you ever want to do a separate kids gift exchange next year, count me in. Then the real silence came. Not the quiet kind, the frosted kind. I wasn't removed from the family group chat, but suddenly I wasn't in it either. No replies to my thanks for hosting. No photos of Ellie in the party recap collage. Just radio silence. I didn't reach out, didn't follow up, didn't explain, because there was nothing to explain. They didn't forget her. They excluded her. They tested whether I'd stay silent, and I didn't. And now, the weight of that made them uncomfortable. A week later, my sister posted a vague tweet. Some people will ruin a whole holiday just to be the center of attention. No names. Didn't need them. It got one like from my mom. I didn't respond because I was too busy helping Ellie write thank you cards to the people who had thought of her, like my coworker who gave her a puzzle book, and our elderly neighbor who baked us a cinnamon loaf just because. People who didn't share our blood, but somehow had bigger hearts. That weekend, Ellie looked up at me while drawing a snowflake. She said, "Mommy, I like our Christmas better." I blinked. "You mean ours at home?" She nodded. "It's warmer, even when it's cold outside." And just like that, the frost from the family I was raised in didn't matter. Because the warmth we were building together, the one they always kept for me, now lived inside my daughter. And no silence, no cold room, no forgotten gift could touch that. The next year, we didn't go to my mom's party. No explanation. No RSVP. Just nothing. I didn't announce it. Didn't cause a scene. I simply chose us. Ellie and I started a new tradition. On Christmas Eve, we made cocoa with marshmallows that looked like tiny bears. She picked matching pajamas for both of us, blue flannel with little gold stars. We danced around the kitchen while baking gingerbread cookies in weird shapes because she couldn't care less about perfect edges. And that night, before bed, I gave her one gift. Not something fancy, just something thoughtful. A small storybook, handmade by a local artist. Inside, the story of a little girl who had been overlooked by a kingdom until she built her own. Ellie hugged me so tight, I could barely breathe. The next morning, we slept in. No pressure. No being dressed up to be judged. No explaining why she didn't get the big gift that others did. We built our own holiday. One that didn't hinge on whether others remembered her. Or remembered me. Word got around, of course. When we didn't show up to the party, I got a passive-aggressive text from my mom. "Didn't expect you to hold a grudge through Christmas. That's not how family works." I didn't reply. Because, yes, that's exactly how family works when the only one hurting is the one who stayed quiet. Instead, I focused on something bigger. That January, I launched a small fundraiser. I called it No Forgotten Kids. A toy drive for children who often get overlooked, nieces, nephews, foster kids, neighborhood kids who don't get the big name on the gift tag. I used my design skills to make flyers, posted in local groups, asked friends and coworkers to share. By the second week, our living room was full of wrapped gifts. By Christmas the following year, we had served over 70 children. People asked why I started it. I never named names, just said, because every child deserves to feel remembered. Ellie became our chief helper. She drew cards for each bag, added glitter to wrapping paper, wrote little notes like, "This one's for someone who might think no one sees them. We see you." One day she turned to me and said, "Mommy, are we someone Santa?" I smiled. "No, baby. We're something better. We're proof that love doesn't forget." And that was the holiday we gave ourselves. No cold dining rooms. No fake apologies. No more waiting at the edge of someone else's joy. We created our own table and filled every seat with warmth. The next Christmas came quietly. No knock on the door. No surprise card. Just a text. "Mom, you should bring Ellie by this year. Family should stick together." It sat there on my screen like a trap door. Not an apology. Not accountability. Just a summons. The same people who laughed when my daughter was left out, who acted like her absence from a gift pile was a joke, now wanted us to come back, to sit in that room again, to pretend nothing happened. I didn't reply, not out of spite, but because I had nothing left to explain. Instead, I turned back to the kitchen. Ellie and I were elbow-deep in sugar cookie dough. There was flour on her nose and 3 colors of frosting smeared across her cheeks. We wore new pajamas that year, white and gold. Stars. Because she said they felt like magic. We just finished wrapping our last gift bag for the No Forgotten Kids toy drive. 72 this time. A new record. After dinner, I snapped a picture of us in front of the tree. No filters. Just her sitting in my lap, both of us laughing at something ridiculous. I posted it with a caption. Our favorite season piece. No hashtags. No digs. No need. I got a few messages from old friends and coworkers. Your smile says it all. Your daughter is glowing. That locket moment last year still lives rent-free in my heart. But the most surprising one came from my cousin Erica. We hadn't spoken in years. She wrote,
I saw what happened that day.
I'm sorry I didn't speak up. You taught me what showing up for your child really means. Thank you. I stared at that message for a long time, because that's what this journey had really been about.
Not punishing them.
Not winning, but showing my daughter. That love isn't something you chase. It's something you protect. And sometimes protecting it means walking away from people who drop it too easily. They sent an invitation. I never opened it, because the only one that mattered was the one I sent to my daughter. Every single day. You are enough. You are seen. And you will never be forgotten, not on my watch. The text came in just after 9 a.m. while I was reviewing vendor contracts at the front desk of the company I helped build. Dad, you're no longer my daughter. All future matters will go through my lawyer. That was it. No hello. No warning. Just 20 words to cut me out of both the family and the business, like I was a stain on his suit. I stared at the screen for a full minute. No follow-up. No explanation. Just silence. I sat back in the chair, hands steady, even though everything inside me was shifting. Behind me, I could hear my brother laughing in the hallway. He'd been gloating for days, acting like something was coming. I guess this was it. 3 weeks ago, I found some errors in the numbers. My father had taken out personal loans in the company's name, covering expenses that had nothing to do with business. When I confronted him, he told me to stay in my lane. When I pushed again, he told me I was too emotional to handle leadership.
I didn't yell. I didn't argue.
But I did start taking screenshots. And copies. And backups. I had helped build this company from the ground up. At 19, I was running payroll. By 26, I was managing our biggest accounts. I knew where everything lived, contracts, passwords, supplier chains. And they knew that. But somewhere along the way, they convinced themselves I wouldn't fight back. I looked back at the text. You're no longer my daughter. And just like that, every Sunday dinner, every 14-hour workday, every favor, loan, and sacrifice, they erased it all with a single sentence. So I replied with one. Me. As you wish. Then I minimized the screen, opened my encrypted folder, and started going to work. Bank logins. Payment gateways. Business registrations. Vendor contracts. Digital authorizations. I wasn't angry. I was methodical. I didn't scream. I documented. They thought they could cut me off like a branch. They forgot I was the root. My name is Naomi Brooks. And from wherever you're watching this video, stay with me. Because when my father disowned me by text, I answered like a businesswoman. And I didn't need revenge. I had receipts. Long before they erased me with a lawyer's text, I was already disappearing. One sacrifice at a time. At 19, I skipped college orientation because Dad needed someone to run the front office. Just for a few weeks, he said. It turned into 5 years. While my brother, Darren, came and went as he pleased, pitching big ideas and showing up late to meetings, I was the one tracking inventory, dealing with irate suppliers, fixing payroll glitches. They called it helping the family. But I was the only one who never got paid on time. I worked holidays while Darren flew to Miami for networking. I filed the tax documents. I stayed up until 3 a.m. drafting proposals my dad slapped his name on. And every time I asked for clarity on ownership, partnership, or equity, he'd say, "We're a family business. It's all yours one day." One day. It became his favorite way to pacify me. Just vague enough to keep me hoping. Just firm enough to keep me obedient. When I asked for a raise, he told me, "If you want a paycheck, go get a job like everybody else." But when Darren wanted new office furniture, approved. Instantly. I remember once my mom pulled me aside and said, "Your father expects more from you because he knows you're capable." It's a compliment. But compliments don't pay rent. And they don't build ownership.
Still, I stayed.
Because I believed in the business. Because I loved what we were building until I realized it was never ours. It was his. And Darren's. And I was just the scaffolding. When I brought up some financial discrepancies 2 months ago, tens of thousands misallocated, unexplained withdrawals, Dad said I was being paranoid. Don't go digging where you don't belong. That's when I knew. He didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as a liability with access. So I quietly began collecting every document I'd ever touched. Every tax file. Every vendor contract. Every shared folder. They didn't notice. Because they were too used to me being the one who cleaned up, not the one who walked away. They thought I was lucky to be there. That I should be grateful for the opportunity to work 60 hours a week and still get called just the admin girl. But what they didn't understand was this. I didn't need their approval to do great work. And I didn't need their permission to protect it when the knives came out. So when that message came through, "You're no longer my daughter," all it really did was confirm what they'd been showing me for years. I just finally decided to believe them. The signs were everywhere. I just didn't want to believe them. It started small. A shared calendar invite I was accidentally left off. A vendor meeting rescheduled without telling me. A client I'd handled for 3 years suddenly being reassigned to Darren. At first, I brushed it off. Told myself I was overthinking. But then my email access changed. Certain folders were locked. Invoices I used to sign off on began going straight to Darren, even though he didn't understand half the terms. I asked Dad about it. He laughed and said, "We're just streamlining things. Less confusion." Confusion for who? I was the one who built that system. Then came the bank account notification. The monthly business account summary, which always came to my inbox, suddenly stopped. When I logged in manually, it said, "Access revoked by account holder." That's when I knew. They were phasing me out. Silently. Systematically. Like I was a bad hire they couldn't fire, so they tried to erase me piece by piece.
And Darren?
He couldn't stop smirking, walking around the office like he was next in line for the throne. He even changed the office nameplate outside Dad's office to Executive Founder and Son. It was subtle, but loud if you knew where to look. I overheard him one day in the break room telling a client on speaker, "Yeah, Naomi handles the paperwork, but real leadership? That comes from the top." He meant himself. The guy who couldn't read a balance sheet without color coding. The guy who once approved a supplier payment twice and cost us $12,000. The same week, I found a memo draft buried in the shared drive I wasn't supposed to access.
Subject.
New management structure, Q4 transition. In it, they outlined a new, streamlined executive path where I was listed under administrative consulting part-time basis.
Part-time.
In a company I'd run when they were on vacation. Still, I didn't say anything. Didn't confront. Just took screenshots. Saved files. Noted dates. Because you don't argue with people committed to misunderstanding you. You document. You prepare. And when the final blow came, the text from my father, the formal disowning, it didn't break me. It confirmed what they'd been working toward all along. They wanted me out. And they thought cutting off my bloodline would cut off my power. They forgot the foundation was mine. The systems were mine. The clients trusted me.
So I didn't shout.
I didn't threaten. I didn't try to fix it. I just opened my laptop and got ready to flip the switch. There's a unique calm that comes the moment you stop begging to be valued and start moving like someone who remembers what they built. After my father's text, I made coffee, sat at my desk, opened my encrypted hard drive. Everything was already organized. All the documents, all the passwords, all the contracts I'd quietly pulled into my private archive over the last year. Not because I was planning revenge, but because I knew one day I might need proof. That I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't exaggerating. That I had value. Even if they never said it out loud. The first thing I did was pull up the business registration. Name on file? Mine and my father's. That meant I still had signing power on every major account. I contacted the bank and requested a temporary freeze on disbursements, citing suspected unauthorized restructuring. Completely within my rights as a named co-owner. Then I logged into the payroll system, one I had designed, one they never learned to manage themselves. I removed auto-pay permissions from every account linked to them. Canceled scheduled transfers to Darren's fake consulting firm. I logged into Stripe, PayPal, QuickBooks, anywhere cash flowed, and paused everything. Every recurring supplier, every outbound invoice, every internal system tied to my credentials. Then I emailed our top 5 clients. Very professional, very calm. There will be a temporary pause in operations due to internal restructuring. I am still a listed co-owner and will personally ensure the continuity of services. You will not be billed until we clarify leadership roles. All 5 replied within the hour. They were with me. Next, I called my lawyer, someone I'd worked with privately for months. We finalized a letter of dissolution, one that formally requested either a buyout or dissolution of the partnership, immediately. I wanted out, with damages.
And receipts.
I wasn't walking away empty-handed. Not from something I helped build. I scheduled the letter to go out at 9 a.m. the next day. Then I turned off my phone, ordered dinner,
And watched a movie.
I didn't cry. I didn't shake. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. They thought they were locking me out, but they never realized I'd been holding the master key the entire time. Day 1 was silent. Not a single call. Not a single text. But I knew they'd seen it. My father's lawyer had received the formal notice by 9:03 a.m., proof of business freeze, demand for buyout, and a ledger of every transaction I was halting. The email's subject line was simple. Action initiated per request, Naomi Brooks. By noon, the business credit card was declined at a supplier showroom. By 4 p.m., I heard through a former coworker that 3 employees had approached HR asking why payroll hadn't cleared. Day 2, the panic started. The company's biggest vendor called me directly.
Confused.
Concerned. Naomi, they said it was a system glitch. But is it true? Did you really walk? I smiled. Not a glitch. Just a long overdue correction. My inbox was full. Darren sent 3 messages. Fix this. You're out. You don't get to do this. You're destroying everything. I didn't reply. Because I wasn't destroying anything. I was reclaiming what they tried to erase. At 5:42 p.m., I got a call. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then a knock on my door. Firm. Repeated. I looked through the peephole. Uncle Malcolm. My father's older brother. The same man who once told me at Christmas, "You're the only one with a brain in that office." I opened the door halfway. He looked exhausted. Tie crooked. "I need to talk to you," he said.
I didn't invite him in.
Just leaned on the frame. "They're bleeding," he said flatly. "You locked down everything. They can't access client payments, suppliers are pulling out, payroll's frozen, and the board is livid. They thought you'd never do it." I crossed my arms. They were right, until they pushed me far enough. He nodded. "Look, Naomi, you've made your point. Just come back. Fix it. We'll figure it out later." I laughed softly. "No, Uncle Malcolm. Now we figure it out." He rubbed his face. "Your dad, he's humiliated. Darren's useless. The business might fold." I shrugged. "Then it folds. Or he can buy me out. Full market value, plus damages." He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. "You used to be so quiet," he said. "I still am," I replied. "But silence doesn't mean weak. It just means I was documenting everything." He sighed, then reached into his coat pocket and handed me a manila envelope. Inside, a proposed settlement, buyout terms, with my lawyer's edits already marked in red. I looked back at him. "You knew this was coming." He didn't deny it. "I told them not to push you. They didn't listen." I nodded, tucked the envelope under my arm, and said, "They wanted to deal with me through lawyers. So now they can." And I closed the door, not with anger, but with finality. By the end of the week, the cracks had become craters. The business, once running like a well-oiled machine, thanks to me, was buckling. The operations team couldn't access the vendor dashboard. The payroll clerk couldn't reactivate direct deposits. And clients? They weren't paying because they didn't know who was in charge anymore. Darren tried to salvage the mess with a fake PR blast calling it a minor restructuring. But anyone who had worked with us for more than 5 minutes knew better. The truth leaked fast. Whispers in the industry. A Reddit thread from a former employee. Even a vendor rep shared an anonymous post. Never sideline the person who actually runs your company. By the second week, our biggest supplier pulled their contract. By the third, 2 key staff members resigned, citing ethical concerns. The damage wasn't just financial anymore. It was reputational. And then the letter came. My father's lawyer formally requested a sit-down. He wanted to resolve things amicably. Funny, considering his last words to me were, "You're no longer my daughter." The irony? He still expected me to save the business he threw me out of, to come back, to fix what he broke, to be the bandage for a bleeding empire. But I didn't go.
My lawyer did.
With every document, every agreement, every receipt, they offered a lowball buyout. I rejected it. They blamed me for damages. We submitted proof that those damages were a result of decisions they made after locking me out. Every meeting, every memo, every financial shift. I had it all logged. They never saw the collapse coming, because they never thought I'd let them fall. But here's the thing. I wasn't letting them fall. They jumped. When they disowned me, when they erased me, when they dismissed my worth with a single text message, they thought cutting ties meant cutting my power. But I wasn't tied to them. I was tied to the work. And when they pushed me out, they removed the only thing holding it all together. The last straw was watching Darren post a video online, him pacing the empty office, blaming unforeseen technical issues for the downfall. He didn't mention my name once.
Didn't need to.
Everyone already knew. People reached out privately, former coworkers, competitors, even clients. We know what happened. You don't owe them anything. They were right. I owed them nothing. Not my time. Not my silence. And certainly not my rescue. They created the storm. And now they were drowning in it, without the one person who used to hold the umbrella. 2 months after I walked away, I signed a lease. Not for an apartment. For an office. A clean, sunlit corner space on the 4th floor of a modest building downtown. Big enough for 4 desks, 2 plants, and 1 bold new beginning. I didn't waste time trying to revive what they broke. I built something new. Something that couldn't be taken with a text. NB advisory. My name. My terms. No partners who thought love was leverage.
At first, it was just me and a laptop.
But within weeks, I had 3 consulting clients, small, women-owned businesses navigating toxic family structures just like I had. They weren't looking for perfection. They were looking for boundaries. Protection.
Strategy.
I gave them all 3. I taught them how to separate ownership from guilt. How to draft contracts before the favors start. How to keep their name on everything they build. It was the most healing work I'd ever done. Because every time I showed another woman how to protect her power, I reclaimed a piece of mine. Then the media got wind. A business blog ran a feature. The daughter who froze her father's empire and started her own. I didn't give a full interview. Didn't name names. I didn't need to. The story wasn't about revenge. It was about resilience. And when they asked what I do now, I said, I help women leave the doors that won't open and build their own buildings instead. Lucas, my former team lead from the old business, reached out. He said, I always knew you were the backbone. Let me know if you need a CFO. I smiled, because I didn't just need a team. I had one, built from people who respected me, who asked how I was not what I could give. I set my own hours, wrote my own policies, paid myself first. And one Friday, I sat in that little office, staring at the nameplate on the door. Naomi Brooks, founder.
No one could take it from me.
No one could lock me out. No one could call me emotional, dramatic, or replaceable, because I had drawn the line and made damn sure they couldn't cross it again. It came at 2:17 a.m. A text.
For my father.
We may have overreacted. Can we talk? 12 words. 12 small words. After everything. The man who disowned me by text, who replaced me with my brother and tried to delete me from the very thing I helped build, Now he wanted to talk. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I was tempted to respond, but because it was surreal watching someone realize what happens when the daughter they never valued finally believes them. I didn't respond. I forwarded the message to my lawyer. He knew exactly what to do. By 10 a.m. the next morning, his office had sent a formal reply. All future matters can continue through counsel. Ms. Brooks does not engage in informal communication regarding any business or personal affairs related to previous partners.
Cold?
Maybe, but not colder than. You're no longer my daughter. 2 days later, a courier delivered a final set of settlement papers. Revised. Higher offer. No strings. I signed them with a glass of wine and Nora Jones playing low in the background. Not out of pettiness. Out of peace. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about the message. That I was never going to beg for a seat at a table I built. That I was done being their emergency contact and emotional sponge. That I had outgrown the version of myself they relied on to stay powerful. The week the final deal closed, I got a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name. It was from my mother. I didn't know how to stop him. I should have spoken up. I miss you. There was no apology. Just regret. Which, to me, wasn't the same thing. I folded it once. Slipped it into a file I labeled Things That Tried to Break Me. Then I walked to the back of my office, where a corkboard hung above my desk. Pinned in the center was a photo of me, taken on day 1 of NB Advisory. Just me and a key, unlocking the office that had my name on the lease. And underneath that, in gold ink, was a quote I had written on a sticky note. The text said I was no longer their daughter. The receipts said otherwise. That was the last message that mattered. Because in the end, they came for control. They tried to sever blood like it wasn't bound to years of unpaid loyalty. But I didn't burn down their empire. I just turned off the switch and walked out holding the blueprint.